And good morning, members of the committee. This is Senate Bill 101 by Senator Cromer and Hembry, establishing an official state flag for the state of South Carolina. This was brought about through conversations with Scott Malarick, who's in the audience with us today. And it was officially begun with two provisos, the first in fiscal year 18-19, and then subsequently in fiscal years 19-20. The study committee produced an original design that was published this previous year, and through feedback from the public, they came back with two additional designs, which I believe we're going to be discussing today, in addition to some history. Mr. Chairman?
The impetus behind this bill is I got a phone call from Mr. Malarick, who's in the audience with us today. Scott and I have been friends a long time, and he's, as an aside, helped me work on my campaigns from time to time. But Scott mentioned to me that from what he could tell, there was no standard for the state flag. When it was produced by flag manufacturers, it would be different colors sometimes, different shades of blue. The design of the palmetto tree and the whatever you want to call that thing is not a crescent moon, and there have been different names for it, Gorget, and somebody said something about some Thomas Moultrie's crest or something like that from his family. So anyway, that's not here to be debated this morning or at all. But the flag design, and we've got Dr. Eric Emerson with us this morning from the State Archives, and Dr. Emerson, I know, has worked very hard with Scott and the study committee, and they went back and studied the history of the state flag. And what they came up with was as close to a historical accuracy as they could find. However, when it was published in the state paper and the Post and Courier, we received all kinds of adverse comments on Facebook and in the paper, and all. People were just simply upset. And the movement or the bill itself was not to try to change the state flag, or even, I guess you would say, make it historically accurate, because there was not a one thing that they could point to, if I'm correct, Dr. Emerson, that was be what in the past would have been the official South Carolina state flag. So I asked them to go back and do another study on it and come up with some other designs, and they have.
The Formation of State Flag Study Committee, so this was formed by provisos 117.158 and 117.139. Those two provisos formed the committee. I chaired the committee according to the legislation. Mr. Paul Koch represented the Department of Administration in place of the agency director, Marcia Adams. Robbie Dawkins was the appointee of the President Pro Tem of the Senate, and Scott Malarick, who's here with us today, is the appointee of the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And Dr. Walter Egger, we thought that no historical committee would be really could lack having him on it. So he's the gubernatorial appointee. So what we did is we looked at all the historic state flags that had been produced, and what we wanted to do was go back and find the first state flag that we could, the oldest surviving textile that we could, to both see what kind of color it was and to see if we could find some of those symbols in it. And so this is what we discovered. This is the second South Carolina regimental flag. So this flag was created by the wives of the regiment, of the officers of the regiment, given to the regiment in July of 1776. That first flag that William Moultrie created, it was shot to pieces during the Battle of Fort Sullivan, so they needed a new regimental flag. This one and a red one, which was identical to it, were presented by the ladies of the regiment to the regiment. The red one does not survive. This one survives because the regiment carried it from 1776 to 1779. And in the siege of Savannah, in 1779, Henry Gray, one of the captains of the regiment, was carrying this flag. When he reached the top of the fortifications, he was shot down by members of the 60th Royal American Regiment. So Gray fell off of the ramparts onto this flag. After the British were when the British were clearing the dead off the field, they found this flag, gave it to Augustin Prevost, who was the commander of the 60th Royal American Regiment and also commanded Savannah during the siege. His family passed that down through the years until it was finally given to the Royal Green Jackets Museum, which is the light infantry museum in the UK in Winchester. And then from there, it came into the possession of the Smithsonian and the State Museum. So it's jointly held by those two bodies. So we came across this, and it has 2 of the 3 symbols from the South Carolina state flag on it. So you've got the color, blue, indigo, that we talked about. So this is the oldest surviving textile from the Revolution that we could find. And it has the crescent there in the middle of it on the drum. It's really small. I'll show you an enlarged version of that as we go on. So we talked to staff at the Smithsonian Institute about doing a color analysis of this. This is right when COVID took hold, and so they really couldn't work. They all had to work from home. They were sent home. So we turned to Clemson University, who had been so involved in the creation of the second official state flag in 1910. There's not a textile department at Clemson anymore, but there is a department of graphic communications. The chair of that department was more than willing to help us do a color analysis of this flag to come up with an official color for a state flag, and so this is the color right here. This is Pantone 282C. Through his analysis, this is what we came up with, which this body has recommended as the color, the official state color of South Carolina. Right now, the official state color just says indigo blue, but since we've done an analysis of this flag, we recommended that this also be the state color, indigo Pantone 282C. So this was deriving the first color. Yes, sir.
Senator Sumter may have a question.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask one. That's one question I kind of have is about the color.
Yes, sir.
Is that color pretty well translating across on this presentation? To what we
No,
see?
it's not.
Okay.
So, and this is one of the problems with these programs. You know, every program will have, well, colors will be a little bit different because this isn't really a design program. I mean, I've got this in PowerPoint, so I can't go into there and create a 282C. So that's transferred from a file that was sent to me from Sam Ingram at Clemson, and so every program will translate that color differently. So that's not exactly the right color, even though it looks closer to me on this screen than it does from me looking at an angle up there. It looks lighter to me.
Yeah,
So,
and so that's the question I was kind of leading into is, I mean, I would, in my opinion, and everybody's got opinions on this, as you know, I mean, we should use indigo, right? That's the color we should probably make most sense to use. But the question I have is sometimes you see indigo represented as something closer to a royal blue, maybe a little bit darker.
Yes, sir.
Other times you see it as almost like a purplish navy. So
Right.
So what is it? I mean, can we see it at some point in time, like a sample of it?
a sample of indigo. So there's a Pantone that's indigo, but it's not close to this Pantone. It's far redder. So what you're saying about looking more purple, that's so in the Pantone, what all graphic designers use in that scale, something that's called indigo is more purple, and it doesn't fit this. This is 282C. There's a darker version of this, which was been commonly used by flag manufacturers, which is 281, and that's called Old Glory Blue. And the reason that flag manufacturers use that is because they can use a single color for the U.S. flag, for the South Carolina flag, anything that looks dark blue. They can save money by just producing the same blue over and over again. But even the name Old Glory Blue is really kind of antithetical to South Carolina history. It just doesn't fit with what we're doing, so and the history of the state. So this is one Pantone over from what's traditionally been used. And then I've talked to flag manufacturers to reproduce this, and even they have a difficult time doing it. It comes down to dye lots. And so, and sometimes they'll think they're producing the same dye lot, 281, which is traditionally what they used, Old Glory Blue, and it comes out looking different ways. Like I could have brought you samples today and showed you 282C and held it up, and 2 samples would have looked different based upon who was producing, whether it was Annan or Valley Forge. So in our efforts to standardize, we wanted to go to this textile, at least have a Pantone name for it, and have some general color for it, instead of just indigo, which could be any range of colors. That's probably too long an explanation for you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
While we're on that point, just curious, have other states undergone a similar exercise? Because I think to your point there, obviously we will be able through this legislation to define what the official state flag is, but the day after we do this, 10 different textile plants are going to produce 10 different things.
Well, other states, yes, sir. Other states have kind of standardized their state flag, But whoever is producing them for the state of South Carolina, we have two main producers right now, Annan out of New Jersey and Valley Forge out of Pennsylvania, who also has a plant here in South Carolina. Those are we've been reassured will produce whatever we want them to produce.
Are those the two that Center for
Yes,
Food
those are the
right
two
now
that
are
you'll see
doing
most
different
frequently.
things? Yeah.
So they'll produce whatever color we want to produce, and we've got that assurance from them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay. The other thing, the other main symbol that comes off that flag is a crescent, and the form and the shape of that crescent, which way it points in, has been something that's changed throughout history. The first official South Carolina state flag, that crescent was large. It was kind of jammed up into the left-hand corner, and the points were going straight up, a true crescent. Then A.S. Sally, for the second official state flag, tilted that crescent towards the corner. And the reason he did is if you'll look in that's Henry Gray's painting right there of the flag at Fort Sullivan. That's a contemporaneous painting. That was done immediately after the battle. If you look, that crescent is pointing in the corner. Sally was familiar with that painting that was at the Gibbs Museum of Art. Sally was originally from Charleston. So he was familiar with that painting, and so he turned that crescent from the first official state flag on an angle towards the corner. That's been the state flag for the majority of its history has been on an angle like that. Now, how that crescent looks, is it fatter, is it thinner, things like that, that's varied from flag to flag. So we took the crescent off the drum in the middle of that second South Carolina state flag. You'll see the crescent there on the drum, and that's the form and shape that we had it designed to. So it looks rounder, not as thick as the one that Sally had on the second official state flag. So that's the shape of the crescent that we recommended for adoption on that flag. That's blue, and since I had it on a white background, I had it as blue instead of white on a blue background. But that's where we got the crescent from. So the color and the crescent both came from that flag that you see represented in the right-hand corner, the second South Carolina flag, the oldest textiles that we have.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Doctor.
Yes, sir.
To your point about this, I mean, I think that since we had you just skip straight to the committee report because we all agreed with the history of the state flag, and I think everybody here understands everything you're saying and appreciates that. I mean, the ultimate goal here of the recommendations y'all have given us is to get back to the original roots of the flag, which is revolutionary. It's the Revolutionary Era, right? I mean,
Yes,
it's the idea of Fort Sullivan, Moultrie and his regiment, and repelling the British invasion. So whether
Yes, sir.
it's the thickness of the crescent or the Pantone, which is a fun word, indigo recommendation, everything's going to this regimental flag. You're trying to get back to the roots of it in terms of the popularized notion of a crescent moon and all this. We're going back to the historical revolutionary sort of roots of this flag and what the state was founded on.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Absolutely. 4 examples of historic palmettos that we looked at that were just official state palmettos. And then we looked at scores and scores of historic palmettos that appeared on militia flags, club flags, regimental flags, you name it, everybody had a palmetto. So the first and oldest is that one on the state seal. That's at the South Carolina Department of Archives and History. You see the palmetto there? That was produced right after the Battle of Sullivan's Island. You see the palmetto and the broken oak tree at the bottom that denotes the British fleet that had been repelled. The problem with that palmetto is the wispy nature of those those fronds. And really, palmettos don't look like that, to be absolutely honest with you. Then we have the first official state flag, as created by the State Arsenal in Columbia. That's the one on the right. So that's what the first official state flag looked like. And then you have a visual representation of it on letterhead on the lower left. Both of those are really hard to reproduce, and the one on the upper right we thought was not very aesthetically pleasing, and the one on the left and lower left we didn't think could be reproduced well. And then we have Sally's flag. This was the second official state flag that you see in the lower right-hand corner. If you notice there, it doesn't have any detail about the bark. There's no grass at the bottom. We weren't thrilled with the palmetto fronds on that. We weren't especially thrilled with that. So we started looking at documents that we had at the Department of Archives and History. So that's Ellen Hayward Jervey's sketch of the palmetto tree that Sally took, modified, and put on the second official state flag. So our thought was, if Clemson could reproduce the color, if they could document the color, the Department of Graphic Communications could replicate Jervie's design in a way that would be aesthetically pleasing. And it would also give credit to Jervie, who had been overlooked by Sally. And, he paid her $5 for all her design work and then sent her a letter saying it would have been $10 if she'd been more patient with him. And that was mad because in the correspondence, he asked her to marry him twice, and she said no twice. So, I mean, this is intertwined with all kinds of personal relationships and everything. But we thought if that could be reproduced, that would be a testament to her, and it also would harken back to the second official state flag in a way. Regrettably now, this is what Clemson came up with. And that's the first flag recommendation we had. Now that looks more like a real palmetto. We've got legislative manuals from the 1940s and 50s that have examples of palmettos on them that are ragged looking, that look, they're not these perfect stylized palmettos. So that looks in a lot of ways more like a palmetto than the stylized versions that people are used to seeing. So that was our first recommendation, and that's what caused the great angst in social media and the backlash and things like that. That's got the color and the crescent just like we talked about. So that I wanted to explain to you is that's got the trunk with the detail just like Jervie had written in. We perhaps and probably set too high a bar for the graphic communications department at Clemson. We probably gave them a task that they could not sufficiently carry out, and so.
But this wasn't a sketch of a palmetto tree after Hurricane Hugo, right? This was.
No, it's not. And that was a very humorous, tweet there. That was very, So after hearing that, we understood that this was not going to be sufficient. So unless anybody has any other questions about that design, I'll just switch on to the two that we put in the addendum to the State Flag Study Report. Right, and so this is on page 9 of. This is in the addendum. This is proposed alternate design A. Okay, this has the top of Sally's flag from the second official state flag with the trunk and the grass at the bottom from Jervie's drawing. So that's the proposed alternative to what we initially proposed, what we initially submitted, which was Jervie's design. Okay, and I'll go on to the second one. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
A couple things. I don't mean any disrespect to Miss Jervie, but it sounds like she was trying to get $10 for $2.50 work. I just don't know why are we so married to that?
We're not. We're not married to that design, and we'd be glad to produce other things. And there are other historic designs, but there's nothing historic between 1910 and the early 50s.
Well, in the 1910 Sally flag, was that was actually adopted in code at some point in time?
That's
right?
adopted in code in 1910. Well, it's passed in 1910, codified in 1932, repealed in 1940 because Clemson did not want to make flags at cost. They wanted to make money off making flags. And they didn't want to deal with Sally anymore. It's just an irascible human being, just really difficult to deal with, and you can see it in the correspondence. So they basically wanted to be free from that legislation. So that's repealed in 1940. If they had just repealed the portion that said Clemson has to produce flags at cost, we'd still have a design. But it repealed the entire legislation, which spelled out blue flag, white crescent, white palmetto.
Was there any discussion on the committee about just going back to the Sally flag?
We did.
What was wrong with using this?
Well, so we could have gone back to the Sally flag, but we thought that the trunk not having detail and the bottom not having detail was not exactly what we thought. That was aesthetically unpleasing. People weren't pleased with it between 1910 and 1940. So with this drawing, we kind of take care of that. We add detail to the trunk, just like in the Jervie drawing, we add grass at the bottom. Sally's flag, and I'll try to go back here, I apologize.
And that was my other question. Why do we need grass at the bottom?
We don't. This is Sally's flag right here in the lower right-hand corner.
Right.
There's no detail on the trunk, there's no bottom. Now, the crescent we won't argue about because no one likes that. So
I'll stop on this point, but if it's a uniform state symbol and you want some historical context, I just don't know why we keep playing around with this detail, all this detail like in the trunk and on the ground, because ultimately someone's not going to like it. So I just, my thought's kind of been that the more simple you can make it, probably the better. But that's, again, everybody's got an opinion on this. That's just
Sure.
mine.
Mr. Chairman, if I could speak to that a little bit. I mean, just so we understand what we're trying to do, because I mean,
Yes, sir.
I think everybody, this goes back to Chairman Talley's point earlier. This is a popularized symbol. It's become not only the symbol of the state, but everything to do with the state, whether it's on a golf shirt or a golf cart in the case of Senator Cromer. So that's why there's obviously a lot of passion about it.
Sure.
I mean, I think, I'll speak for myself. I don't think anybody's overly thrilled with that first flag recommendation, but if the idea is to try to go back to historical roots, I mean, the two alternatives you've proposed, just so I understand what we've got here, and to Senator McElveen's point, I mean, proposed alternative A is an attempt still to go back to the original regimental flag, right, with the coloration.
Well, yes, sir. The color and the crescent
And the color
go
and the
back to
crescent.
that flag, but the palmetto harkens back to the first official state flag.
No, I understand. That's what I was getting
Yes,
at,
sir.
though. It's a hybrid. You're basically
second
still
official.
taking historical symbols. You're taking
Yes, sir.
the coloration and the crescent from the regimental flag from the Moultrie era, and then you're taking a palmetto that's sort of a hybrid of the Sally flag with the Jervy grass at the bottom.
Right.
Which
Yes,
is
sir.
what most people in this state have come to expect, which is the little grass spot at the bottom. So
Sure.
to the senator's point at the end, Senator McElveen, if the idea is go back to the Sally flag, I think you're trying to, as far as I can tell, appeal to people's popular notions of what the flag looks like while still putting it in more of a historical rooting, because, I mean, proposed alternative B, you basically say here, there's nothing really historic about it, right? I mean, it's not really historically rooted as your proposed alternative A or the original proposal would be.
Well, and I guess then it comes down to the definition of historic. So, the National Park Service judges anything 50 years old as being historic. Anything over 50 years old as being worthy of listing on the National Register or being a National Historic Landmark. So if we're going by that, the 50-year mark, then this alternative and another alternative that also is very popular, that's made by another flag manufacturer, it fits that. The 50-year criteria, it fits that.
But you would say, Doctor, that proposed alternative design A would go, at least elements of that proposed design would go back to the founding of the state and indeed the American Republic, yes?
Yes, sir.
While proposed design B would not.
Well, no, the crescent and the color go back to the founding.
But you're still updating that as well, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The palmetto would go to the 50s. And in the case of A, the palmetto goes to 1910. In the case of B, the palmetto goes to 1953. The other elements, the crescent and the color, go back to the founding.
So whichever one of these proposed alternatives we adopt, or if folks want to go back to the original, all three of the proposals are going to go back to the founding of the state with regard to the coloration, the crescent.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. And then I'll put B up again, and if you'll look over my right-hand shoulder, in that corner, you'll see the top half of that flag right there. And so that flag has been around since 1953. We have, I could show you some images of it at a dedication, of a marker dedication 53. The other flag that's currently flying over the State House, that's produced by the other main manufacturer, elements of that have been around. You see, if you look in the middle there, that's a 1953 image of a dedication of Blue Star Highway. You look on the right, that's the image of, that's a 1957 legislative manual, and that palmetto almost is flying over the State House today, which is manufactured by another state contract flag manufacturer. There too, Valley Forge and Annan. And that's Valley Forge, Annan's flying over the State House.
One more question. That one on the legislative manual, what top is that? What top is that? Is that one in particular?
That's something that was created by one of the two main flag manufacturers.
So there's no historic context for.
No, that's just something that one of their designers came up with.
Okay.
So that and the one to the left of it are just something that flag manufacturers came up with. And then to kind of throw things a little further off, if you look on the far left, that's Clemson creating a flag in 1950 after they had the official flag revoked. That palmetto doesn't look anything like Sally's palmetto. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope that kind of clears up some of it, and I apologize, gentlemen, if it's a little bit confusing, but
Most
just usually-
appreciated,
Yes,
your
sir.
work and that of the committee, for sure. Any further comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a comment, is the historical flag that y'all came up with originally, that probably is the best symbol to accurately depict history of the state flag. It just won't sell to the public, I don't think, whenever it goes out. But let me get you to go back. Look at Design A in your sheet, and then look at Design B. Design A is pretty much what we would call symmetrical, and I think that's what threw off the people who commented on the flag design, is they think it, and this is Ronnie Cromer's mindset, but they think that it should be symmetrical. Well, you're not going to find a palmetto tree that's symmetrical. I mean, they're going to be all different shapes. If you go to the Design B, to me, that one has got the, what do you call them, palm, not the fronds, but the bark on the side that comes out or whatnot, because all of them have that. We have to have ours at the beach trimmed once a year to get rid of all of those. You don't see any on Design A. The tree itself, to me, Design B probably looks the best, but again, it's not symmetrical, and you're going to have people out there, as soon as we approve this, that are going to start raising sand about, why are you changing the flag? But as Dr. Emerson just pointed out, look at the flag that we have back there. That is the current flag emblem, the palmetto tree that we're using right now. But once we say we adopt that, then everybody's going to say, oh, that's one of the ugliest ones you could have adopted. So my point is, regardless of what we decide as a subcommittee and then the committee and then the Senate, you're only gonna make probably 35-40% of the people upset, because they're going to say that that's not a good looking flag. We don't like that, when nobody's ever said anything about this one right here. You haven't heard any comments at all. So I'm just pointing that out, that we're going to get that regardless of what you decide on. So.
But 35 or 40% is a lot less people than I usually make mad when I vote. Yes. Yes, Senator Summer.
I'd agree with the senator from Newberry. I mean, the Design A, I mean, it's more symmetrical, but it's still imperfections there, which I appreciate. It's not totally symmetrical, but I mean, probably on the top of alternate Design B is the one thing that I got the most phone calls about, because it may be a little more realistic, but I mean, that tree got hit with the ugly stick. I mean, there's just there's no question about that. So I think people appreciate the history, but they also want it to be, to your point, aesthetically pleasing. I guess we've been tasked with finding some sort of middle ground on that.
So, Mr. Chairman, I guess my question is on that. I mean, all of us kind of understand what the doctor's recommendation is, and we got these. So is it your objective today that we're going to pick one of these three or one of these two and make a recommendation to full committee? Is that our objective?
Well, that's certainly an option. I was talking with Mr. Thomas. We can actually submit both of these to the full committee too, if we wanted further input. I'm not married to either concept, whatever the will of the subcommittee is. Before we get too far down the road, though, Mr. Mallory had signed up to speak as well. Do you want to be heard, sir?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask you one last question?
Yeah,
Please? It's down.
absolutely.
Yes, sir.
And I'm sorry, I mean, this is really drilling down on some of this, but
No, I appreciate it.
But to me, the grass is something also that adds something or takes something away from it.
Okay.
And you showed us that Jervy design. I think you said the Jervy design is what's implemented for as far as the grass in Design A, right?
Yes, sir. If you'll look up on the screen right there, that grass that's in that sketch is what we were replicating on Design A. Whereas the thing that we submitted before had more of a kind of reverse. This design probably should have had the grass the other way. I somehow Clemson kind of flipped that on its end there, but.
Because to me, you could easily say that the grass in Design B is reflective of the Jervy design too. I mean,
It is. I mean, if you look at the earliest iterations of that, and let me go back really quick. The earliest iterations of that flag had no. Hold on, I've gone too far. I'm sorry. Had Nope, sorry, wrong way.
And just what I'm getting at, Mr. Chairman, is I'm just finding myself wondering how that Sally flag would look with the grass from Design B. I mean, that's getting way in the weeds, but
If you look at that center flag, the earliest iterations of that flag that we've had as design has no bottom.
right.
So we had added that as well.
But it has the same top. It looks like
Has
as
the same
Design
top, yes,
B.
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mallard, good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank my state senator, Ronnie Cromer, for being very responsive to this and kind of spearheading this and taking some of the slings and arrows of our first design. I kind of feel like the guy responsible for this when this all started about 4 years ago. I happened to be walking across the State House grounds, working in the Wade Hampton building. I looked up at the State House dome, and I realized the flag that was flying then was different than the flag I had seen going back to my freshman year at USC back in 1980, that had been flying for 50-plus years. I wondered why had it changed. Did we have a governor's proclamation, or what happened? And with Senator's help, we researched it, and we had a new flag manufacturer. Low bidder, probably. So I was kind of upset that the low bidder decides what our historic state flag looks like. We have one of the most popular but historic state flags in the country. It means something. The tree means something. The crescent means something. The blue means something. And I thought it was kind of careless to leave it to the low bidder. And Senator Cromer agreed. And the idea was to have a standardized flag, a uniform flag that we all agreed was the official flag. We talked about other states. California went through this. They have a big bear on their flag, if you noticed. That had changed over the years, and then they adopted one official version. New Hampshire has a ship of state on their flag, and Texas has a star. It's all unified design. And so the flag that's flying on top of the State House dome right now, which I would consider the official state flag, if you're walking across the state and you're visiting the state, that would seem to be the official state flag, is different than the one hanging in the Senate chambers and different than the one hanging in the House chambers right now, which is the same one in the governor's office and the same one back here. Just different design manufacturer. And this started off as very simple. Let's pick one and just adopt it. We have a state reptile. Why can't we have an official state flag? And so a couple of years ago, the Senate committee came back and said, all right, we like the idea of a universal uniform flag, but let's base it on some historic records. And so that's why they put together this 5-member committee headed by Dr. Emerson, who's done just an amazing job. You don't know the work he's put in on this. And we've come up with something, and then it's so popular now. It's on everything. Sure, I've had this tie for 20 years, and this is the flag that you see right there is the flag on my tie. It's just a coincidence. But if you know Joe Wilson, he wears one of these ties every single day of the year. So it's important. And a lot of constituents may ask you, why are we changing the flag? What's wrong with the flag we have? And I don't know how you answer that, but there's nothing wrong with it. We just don't have a standardized version. We don't want to dramatically change it. I've had hundreds of suggestions given to me. Let's put the Liberty back in the crescent. Let's change the tree to this and that. We don't want to dramatically alter it. We just want to standardize it, make it uniform, and move forward from there. And we've gotten into the weeds a little bit, but we have to, I guess, we have 3 elements: the color, the crescent, and the tree to design. And so I have, I guess, 2 more suggestions that we can tweak if we wanted to. But
Mr. Chairman, there's one other. The one that's flying over the State House is not on here. It's a little newer than 53. It's a little younger than 53, that we could offer that up as a suggestion as well. It looks more like the one that we saw before that was on the State House manual.
Come back up so we can get you on.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. We've got the other one that we can offer up is that one on the top.
we can pass this out, but the one on the top is flying on top of the State House now.
And that's another design of a flag manufacturer.
Right.
So it's the one on the far right. That's not exactly like what Scott's showing there, but that one, it looks kind of like a
More rounded top.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Never seen a palmetto tree with a rounded top.
So for the last 50 so years, these are the 2 flags that have been flying over the State House. Right here. This one's about for 4 years, 3.5 years. This one for about 50 or 60.
Right, and they just go back and forth based upon who gets the bid. And then there's some alternative palmettos out there. The one on my lapel pin, I think, is actually a Chinese manufactured one that it's the only lapel pin I could find. So anyways, but the one with the tapered, has a tapered trunk and something else, but we don't know who came up with that. And the only place that produces it is overseas, and the colors are kind of messed up, so.
Any further questions? Mr. Mallett, thank you for being here, and thank you for your work on the committee as well. Anybody?
Mr. Chairman, what I would recommend is, I don't know how the rest of the members on the subcommittee feel, but of the two designs that they came up with, the last two designs would be either Design A or Design B. And, you know, what I would also recommend is maybe approving, passing both out to full committee, whatever y'all think about that, and let the full committee decide which one, the majority of the full committee, maybe decide which one they feel is the best. Or you could even pass it out in the same motion to the full Senate and let the full Senate come up with an amendment to decide which one that the full Senate thought. And then that way nobody's feelings would be hurt, and we would maybe have a chance to get enough publicity in it for our Senate colleagues to understand that whichever one we pick is not going to suit everybody, but nobody's complained about the one that's being produced now. And if that's the one that winds up being chosen, I go back to what I said earlier, you're going to have a lot of people that said, why did y'all choose that? Well, we're just choosing what's already been produced by a flag manufacturer is what it amounts to there in Design B. So it's up to the subcommittee, but that's just kind of a recommendation. Is maybe, I'm not saying pass the buck, but get more people involved in trying to decide which one we like the best.
Do you think it's, Mr. Chairman, do you think, to Senator Cromer's point, I think recommending both out to either the full committee or full Senate is good. I don't think we want to recommend adding 2 or 3 more designs. I think we all know you give the Senate 10 options, it'll take 10 years. So if we take these 2 and say these are the 2 and send it to the full committee or the full Senate, I'd support you on that.
Yep, Senator Sumter.
Maybe think about something, maybe a question for one of y'all. I mean, I wonder if we said, you know, here's what we're flying right now, this is a design from a manufacturer, can we appropriate that likeness?
Yes, sir. I mean, so yes, absolutely. So, I mean, the manufacturers don't have any problem with neither of them can trace exactly how they came to make that palmetto, so that neither of them are wedded to it, as long as they can both bid on those flags, and they don't, there's no, I guess, copyright on that palmetto.
That's
There's
what
no
I wonder about. I mean,
copyrights.
if it's not something that originated with us and something that they've designed, or, you know, with a graphic designer in-house, they can't claim any kind of ownership over that or any kind of rights to it?
They could, but we've got verbal, you know, and if we could get that in writing as well, Senator, I can understand that perfectly, that says basically like we have no copyright on this design, and letting the other flag manufacturer also produce that same design. I think what it's going to come down to is, you know, both of them just want the business. Like right now, you know, both of them have the business. One for on top of the State House, one for inside. I don't foresee there being a problem with that, but Senator, we'd be more than glad to go and get that affirmation, get that on paper.
Yeah, I just wondered if we were to adopt something and say this is now our state flag and something that was designed by a private flag manufacturer, they come in and say that you can have it, but we want to get paid for it. You know,
Right. Yes, sir. As far as I know, and please, Scott, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the only person who copyrighted or trademarked palmettos was from the Carolina shop here in town, and that's a palmetto like we haven't shown you. It's got a really wide trunk, and that's the only one I ever saw that had been copyrighted or trademarked.
The question's been asked, can you trademark or copyright our state flag? And to my knowledge, the answer is no. Like the United States flag, you can take that and produce it on shirts and whatever. The same with our flag. Once we have it, we can't copyright it. We can't trademark it. But we sure heck don't want to infringe on anybody who's done it. Like the Carolina shop has their tree on this. Right. Used to have it on this University of South Carolina football field, and they had an agreement with the shop to put it there. So we couldn't use theirs. But once we have ours, people can take it and reproduce it as if they will.
Are you all right with what they were saying? Passing both out. If there's nothing further, Senator Cromer, do you want to restate your thoughts a minute ago in the form of a motion? And
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the alternate design A and alternate design B that the Flag Study Committee has come up with to be taken forward to the full committee, and let the committee decide if they want to choose one of the two or pass both of these out to the full Senate for a decision. And I would make that in the form of a motion. So,
And I'll second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
all right, motion made and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. So we will send this to the full committee, which will.
And Mr. Chairman, there's a little bit of wisdom in letting the full Senate do it. That way, more people can be presented with the blame than just the subcommittee. So,
Oh, Senator, you know, we'll get blamed for even debating this bill on the floor and not something else, but that's all right. That's what we do.
yes, sir.
All right, anything else for the good of the cause? Hearing none, we stand adjourned. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. We really appreciate your time and your patience on this, through this process.